I've been asked to make a mono version of this patch because some of you guys run mono in the PA and therefore you need a patch to sound decent in the front of house. Now the problem with the Helix in general is that the delays and reverbs really sound their best in stereo. And that's because the stereo delays and reverbs that we love all have some sort of chorusing and modulation involved. When you sum to mono the chorusing effect, you really have a phase issue happening, and that really causes some mushiness to happen. So today's goal, we're going to build a part go preset from scratch using only stock settings, no external IRs, and no jailbreaking. So let's get started. We're going to use something a little bit more traditional in the worship front, and we're going to use something a bit boxier, the AC15, which is a pretty decent amp. It brings up the 1x12 Bluebell cab by default. I'm going to change that to the Silver Bell. Now, as I've mentioned in my previous video using the HX Storm build, with the amp and cab module, you really want to build these at the same time. So here are my cab settings that I defer to. The 121 ribbon mic, pulled 5 inches back with a low cut. I'm going to change this up to 100 Hertz because this is going to be used in the context of a worship set. And in general, the stock cab settings tend to be very, very judicious with the high cut. So I'm going to turn that up to 11K because I don't want too much high frequency loss. I'm going to change this up to 33% because I do like some early reflections, and that's going to be decent. Okay, that's all right. Now let's go to the amp sound. This is the stock sound that comes up. It's a bit on the soft side, so I'm going to do a couple of things. I'm going to turn all that up to 10. That already has some dirt and grit inside, which is pretty decent. This is a Telecaster with pretty bright pickups, so I'm going to turn up that bass and just to make it sound nice. And now this has got a bit of a mid cut, which I don't prefer. I'm going to turn that up, and because this is P&W, we're going to make it a bit louder. Now, it sounds pretty okay by itself, but it's very dry, and I do want to hear how the amp interacts with some basic ambience. So I'm going to bring in a simple delay, and I'm going to bring in a glitz reverb just to hear how it sounds like. Now, that's way too reverby, so I'm going to turn that down. I'm going to maybe bring down that feed. I'm just going to make it a simple ambience. You don't want it too crazy. Let's turn this down to something very, very basic, and I turn the pre-delay a little bit. And I'm going to change these settings differently soon. Now, as I mentioned before, the reason why mono sound patches on the Helix or the Pot Go might sound very mushy is because there's some chorusing and modulation going on. To really have that kind of clarity, you want to bring down that modulation as much as you possibly can. So I'm going to bring it all the way down to 0.1, and I have the depth at 5. I might bring this down to maybe even 2.5 or something. Notice how that cleans out the reverb a lot. That's because the modulation is now quite minimal. I'm going to subtitle this video playing things in D major. Now that seems pretty decent. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to change up some of the parameters to really make this amp sound pop. And to do that, I'm going to look at the advanced section. So you can see that by default, all these parameters they sound pretty okay, but I'm going to change it up a little bit because I don't like sag. I don't like too much hum, which is an interaction between the amp and its power section. And I'm going to turn up this bias because I really like an amp that is running hotter, because then the gain, it changes the feel of how it gains out later on with overdrives. Now that we've done the amp sound, I'm going to change up the signal chain just a little bit to make it more the way that I will run it. And I will run this volume pedal right before the amps, and I would want to, and I'm not going to use this at all, so I can actually just completely remove the FX loop. I'm going to move this EQ here, and I'm going to show you why in a minute. Let's do compression. And because we have enough DSP, I think I'm going to be able to dial this in pretty quickly. Now, the default settings on the Kinky comp are really quite aggressively compressed. So I'm going to change this up just a little bit. I'm going to turn the sensitivity and the mix down. So maybe slightly, actually that's a bit too high for my taste. I'm going to turn it down even more. I'm going to turn up the attack. I'm going to turn down the release. So, and as my previous video explored, the compression settings really do make a difference as to how bright, how squished that your sound is going to be. And I do want a milder kind of compression. And one trick is to turn up the level of your compressor. You can hear that that's starting to gain up the amp a little bit more. Now I want it to be at a spot where if I were to dig in, I'm going to have an edge of breakup. So do tweak around that level control so that you get a nice balance between clean and edge of breakup. We're almost there. We're going to put an overdrive, and I'm going to use my favorite overdrive of all time, the Timo overdrive. And my stock settings are going to be as follows. As you can hear, that's actually going to be quite gained up and noisy. So to turn on noise gate, the settings are fine. Let's check out with gain 6, bass 3, treble 6, and level 6. Now, it might seem like the volume jump is quite drastic, but trust me, when you play live in a full band setting between clean and overdrive, you do want a bit of a volume jump, at least a 3 dB jump, because that is going to be when the whole band kicks in, when the whole band comes in. You don't want to be buried in the mix by having your clean and overdrive sounds too close in volume. So you do want a bit of separation in that volume. Now I put the EQ block before the overdrive because I am going to use the EQ as like a juicer. Not that I'm going to blend anything more, but I'm just going to squeeze a bit more gain out of the Timmy by means of a frowny curve EQ. So you know a smiley curve EQ is where you get those big beefy metal tones. A frowny curve EQ is going to be like a mid boost and a level boost into the overdrive, and that results in more gain coming out. So I'm just going to quickly not randomly, but I'm going to just boost and cut frequencies. I'll cut here, and importantly, bring up the level to 5 dB and above. So what we have without the EQ, with the EQ, so we've dialed in 3 levels of gain: clean, gain 1, gain 2. The AC15 is a pretty cool amplifier in that when you have a volume boost in front of it, it doesn't make the whole signal jump up by that proportional volume like a Fender amp would, because a Fender is really like a PA kind of sound. The AC15 grinds up with more volume in front of it. So for example, if you were to just use the EQ, this is the clean. This is with the EQ in front of it. You can hear that it's grinding out quite nicely like a mid-boost sort of thing. So you can use the EQ like a pseudo overdrive, a very light overdrive kind of thing. So now that we've got these two things going on, I'm going to tweak the delay and the reverb as a final touch. So I'm going to change this up to my favorite delay of all time, the vintage delay. And because we've got a DSP, we can do that. I'm going to bring this before the amplifier. And the reason why I want to do that is because I want the delays to crunch up and grind up. So let's go to our favorite .8 delay. To avoid the mushiness in a mono sum patch, we're going to bring up the fidelity of the delay. So we're going to bring up these settings, the bit depth and the sample rate, to make it higher. Turn that rate down as much as possible and turn the depth up so that there's minimal chorusing. But I do want a little bit more chorus. Make sure the headroom is all the way up to 12 dB, and this is the sound you get. So what happens if you turn it up to your .8 delay settings? Turn the overdrive on, you should hear some measure of distortion happening on the delays. That's a pretty cool sound. I'm going to keep that in. Now we're going to go to the reverb. And for the reverb, I'm going to have this as it is. Again, to reduce the mushiness happening with mono summing, make sure that the delay and reverbs are brighter and they're not modulating. And the way to do that with the glitz reverb, turn up that low cut all the way up to 500 Hertz. And that's going to basically not have that thunderous low end that might mush up the sound, and bring that high cut down to, let's say, 6 to 7 kilohertz, because we don't want that brightness to also contribute to that mushiness. So you're going to get a very mild kind of reverb. So that's not too bad. I'm going to keep that delay there, settings right. Remember to keep that rate and depth down too. So rate is 0.1, depth at 5, and the modulation mix low as well. And we don't want it too low because you do want some of that chorusing, because that's what makes the modulation reverb really fun sounding to play. Now to do a control scheme that makes sense. Now I normally keep my top two buttons on the Pod Go as my delay plus and my reverb plus. And before we go on, if this video is providing some value, do hit that like button. It lets me know that this is something that is relevant for you, and it encourages me to make more videos just like this. If you are a worship musician on the same journey as me, do consider subscribing and following me along. It's still a bit too high, so we're going to turn that up. Actually, don't be afraid to turn it all the way down. FS2, I'm going to make this minimum 22, maximum 44. Then I'm just going to turn this to green to make sure that I remember what it is. So by itself, up. So on to Reverb Plus, which is going to be my other foot switch. I'm going to assign this FS3. I'm going to assign this FS3 as well. Turn this on. I'm going to have the mix at 22 and 2244. It seems like a good place to start. I'm going to have a minimum decay at 3, maximum decay at 8. And this should sound like this. turn up the delay as well, you're going to get this sound. Alright, now it's just a matter of making everything pretty. I'm gonna rename this as Reverb Plus. I'm going to turn this into, I'm going to rename this as Delay Plus. I'm going to rename this as Stage 1 because I intend to have the overdrive as a stage 1 and the stage 2 is to stack on the EQ before the delay. So if you made it this far, congratulations. We now just need to test out all the sounds possible out of this configuration. And that's it. This is how I create a Part Go preset from scratch, and I hope you have fun building the preset alongside with me. So this is going to be a free preset that's available on my Buy Me a Coffee page. Do check out the link in the description box. Everything's down below. I hope you have fun building this preset with me, and if you have any questions at all as to further settings, deep diving, do put it in the comment section below. I will respond and I will help you out as much as I possibly can. If you do want to see a HX Stomp preset build, I have one right here that you can check out, and it shows basically the same principles but a bit more in depth because I take some time to explain some of the creative decisions behind overdrive and compression especially. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you for watching. This is Justin signing off, and I'm all about worship guitar.